Around $80,000. That was $24,000, around $25,000. Those cost $3,000. Those were $5,000, $40,000 or $50,000.
So we get asked all the time, how much was the building? How much was the facility? And we're gonna run through some of the costs of the project here, and hopefully it'll help you if you're budgeting for a facility. And it really depends on a million things, on what your intentions for the facility are, what you're gonna be using it for, where you're at, all that kind of stuff. So we'll start with the land. Land is gonna vary. We bought 3 acres. That's gonna vary by wherever you're at. So the land, that's a huge acquisition cost and time. So the land purchase, number one, okay, gotta have the land, done. Now the shell, this is a 70 by 120 structure with 18-foot ceilings and a scissor truss, so you have that raised things. You don't have to go this high. How much was stuff, Britt?
Okay, so I'm going to break it down like this. So the labor to build the building was $40,000. We had, I believe, around $80,000 in
the shell building package.
So the outside walls.
The outside metal, the trusses, and the 2x4s and posts.
Correct. So, okay, so we had that. The spray foam for the whole building, all exterior walls, not the inside office wall. That was $24,000. So we have heated floors in the offices. Can't show you those because they're covered up. It's under the concrete.
We can go to the mechanical room.
That whole system, including the water heater for it, all of the hookup, the installation, that was a $12,000 system. It has 7
zones, all that. So we play around with turning them off and on, trying to figure out what heats up. So this comes around into, which all this paint is going to leave, by the way. That then comes into here and it's all web through, whatever. Okay.
We had to cover all the foam that we installed.
Because we're zoned commercial.
So we couldn't have any foam exposed because it's a fire hazard. So the interior metal was around $25,000. And that did the ceiling and the walls. The garage doors, like the garage door openers for these giant doors, were like $1,000 a piece.
Which we don't have yet.
You want to see something? You want to see something we really went over budget on?
What's that, Brittany? The suspense is killing me. Ta-da!
Suspense.
Crazy.
What is crazy? We budgeted like $13,000 for the fence.
I feel so silly now.
You want to know how much it cost?
How much it cost?
$25,000.
At least, yeah. And we bought concrete.
So it's crazy. Like, and that's not even an automatic gate.
No.
Hopefully within the next year, the automatic gate I found is like $2,000 or $3,000, or like the automation. I want to have down there where you see the cones, I want to have like a keypad down there so the guys can open the gate and they don't have to come out and open it up with the lock over here. So the whole, all 8,000 square feet, we did this just plain finished concrete. This is what we have throughout the shop, or for the offices also, and we're going to leave it as is. This is
6 inches thick with mesh and plastic under it for vapor barrier.
Which we did all the prep work ourselves for. The concrete came in around $40,000 for
labor, placed and finished. Placed and
concrete.
Finished, yeah.
So
they did 2 pours, whatever that matters.
2 days. The racks that we have over here, we probably have $4,000 in like racking systems throughout this place. It's not just these ones. So we have these ones, these blue ones, and this. They're all used. We get them from a supply place in Columbus. It's all through warehouserack.com. They have a few sites across the country and they will ship. These things have been great. You can adjust the size, like the space in between the different shelves. You can get them taller, you can get them shorter, whatever. We're going to have around $10,000 in our HVAC and heating system.
That's our cost.
Our cost, that's no labor. The plumbing will have around $7,000 in the plumbing. We did part of it ourselves, we hired some of it out. That is for 2 bathrooms, 2 toilets, no showers, a kitchen sink and a shop sink. So there's that. So the well was $10,000 and we had another $10,000 in our septic system. We lucked out because we didn't have to have a mound system. Which if you're in the city, you would do sewer and water tap.
which is just a whole nother animal.
Here's our shop kitchen. It's fancier than probably what you need. So the shop kitchen cabinets, I had $7,000 in them from Lowe's, but they're all like the slow close drawers.
Down low. I don't want it down like this.
Caleb does not like the
That would be my
microwave.
criticism there.
We did butcher block countertops. Those were the most cost-effective option. So we went ahead and went with those. We did hire all the painting out on the offices except for the ceiling. Poor Caleb bought a paint sprayer gun thing and sprayed the whole ceiling. But I did hire out all of the painting. That was right around $4,000 or $5,000. Kids room. So one thing to consider is, you know, if you're just building a shop and you're putting like all of your equipment in it, that's one thing. But if you're building offices, also you need to consider how much furniture you actually need to fill this place, because I was overwhelmed by how many chairs I need. I mean, I have $1,500 in office chairs alone. We did all masonite doors. So these are all 3 feet wide, solid doors. Those cost $3,000. The bathroom I did the tile work in. That bathroom, or the tile work I did myself, but the tile costs around $600. For all the light, interior lighting, you wouldn't think it, but can lights are very expensive because there's multiple pieces that you have to buy for it, which I didn't consider. So throughout the whole ceiling out here, you had to have the housing unit, you had to have the light, and then you had to have a baffle, and I had to paint all the baffles. Each can light ended up probably being $40 by the time it was all said and done, and I have like 45 of those things in here.
This glass was how much?
So we have 2 pieces of glass here, so you can see into the conference room, and then you can see into the podcast room. We had $1,400 in that. That was delivered. We actually built the frames ourselves with wood from a family property, and my uncle, he actually like sawed it down for us and made this nice
This is
edge.
black walnut or Juglans nigra.
Yes.
And that is sapwood there versus the heartwood. How cool is that? It's beautiful. Not everybody needs a podcast room.
Not everyone needs a podcast room, but we probably have, at the end of the day, probably $4,000 or $5,000 in this room.
Oh, I bet easy.
Alone. But like I said, that's not necessary. So, you know, this video isn't totally fair because we do a lot of the work ourselves. We did all the porch. So, long story short, there's a lot of things that you need to consider and make sure you don't forget. There's little things that will add up your costs, so you have all the trim in the building. And, you know, the painting was cheaper than I thought it was going to be, but it was still an expense. So what we did is all of the appliances, we still had $5,000 in appliances here. We had to have the gas line ran. That was $3,000. We had to have electric set. That was another few $1,000s. Caleb, is there anything else like major that you can think of?
For most intents and purposes, you know, the land acquisition, the building and the shell, maybe a simple office, concrete, the gravel, the parking area, design is a whole nother thing of layout and all that's a whole nother thing we'll need to talk about in that training video resource thing of a shop build. I would still advise putting in like a nice office. I say nice office, but an actual like nice insulated. So what the biggest thing with the building is we decided we put in like slightly cheaper windows so that we could afford to, or help afford putting in the radiant floor heating because we can't ever go back and put in the radiant floor heating, or we can't ever put the building up higher. So we cut the budget on some things to make the others that we can never upgrade for, you know, doable. And so that was like a big thing because we've had many friends build houses, and so we listened to them when they said things they wish they could go back and do, or things they learned over their builds over years. And a huge thing I always listened to was people saying, we didn't have the money then, but looking back now, I would have robbed a bank if I'd had to make X, Y, Z happen. And so it was just like, okay, bite the bullet on some stuff that we can't ever go back and do. We can upgrade doors and windows down the road. That's not an issue. So that was the #1 tenet of that. And then the next big thing was just always having a list of non-negotiables, things you're not willing to compromise on. And I'll tell you, the radiant floor heating is worth every penny. Every penny.
We've been in this building all winter long with no HVAC system. And it is cold outside, but I am in the sweater because our offices are holding at 60 to 70 degrees. One thing I did forget, these doors right here, those were $5,000. We have a bunch of windows up at the top of the walls in the shop. Those are called high bays. Those were...
High bay.
Those were $800 a piece. I wish I would have done 5 more. Caleb does too, but that is my fault. The doors, I believe, are 12 foot. Caleb, are the doors 12 foot wide? Not wide enough, he says. I believe the doors are 12 foot wide, or they're 10 foot wide, and he wishes they were 12 foot wide. He complains about it all the time, so I can't remember. But see those windows that you see up there? I wish there was another one on that far wall and 2 more there, and then I wish we even had some on this side. Those are easy enough to go back and redo. Like we said, something I can't go back and do is foaming the entire inside of the building. So I think the last thing, just like we had for finishing interior, which was supposed to include paint, trim, doors, and furniture, we thought it would cost $30,000. We probably have $40,000 or $50,000 in lighting and furniture, and like I said, all the paint. We did rock wool insulation inside the whole back wall that goes up against the shop, and then inside the conference room and inside the podcast room, and every room that has a ceiling. So there's a ceiling in rooms that we needed quiet because, for instance, this kids' room.
Goodbye, folks. Brittany, great job.
For instance, this kids' room we left open because it didn't really matter, and the kids don't need like quiet. They don't need meetings, or they're not having meetings that it needs to be quiet for. So there is the rock wool insulation, which is a little bit more expensive than your traditional insulation, but I can tell a crazy difference, especially with heat. That podcast room is the best insulated room in this whole place because we were trying to block all of the outside sound, and this room is so hot, which is why we had to put a fan in there until we get all the HVAC stuff going. In my office, I did a built-in system that I saw on Pinterest or Instagram or whatever, but I bought traditional Lowe's cabinets, and then we set them up on 2x4s and installed all of these, had them painted by the painter, so they were painted before we put them in, and then we screwed them together. This project took one guy 1 day to do all of it, and that was probably $1,000 in materials plus his daily rate, but we had one of our guys do it. And then we did shiplap up here. That I think I had like $500 in the shiplap. One thing I wasn't counting on, so I found these doors on Facebook Marketplace. My husband and I have always worked together in this room that's about 5 foot by 10 foot, and now we have 16 by 24 foot between our 2 offices. And I was sad that we weren't going to be working so close, so we decided to leave this open. But I did find these old barn doors on Facebook Marketplace. We bought them. They were $1,700 for the pair. However, and I was like, oh, cool. Like, that won't cost a lot. Yeah, okay. Well, we had $1,700 in the door. I had time sanding them down the best that I could. Then we paid to paint them. I think it was $400 for them for both sides. Both doors, both sides. I had $200 in this barn door hanging system. And it took one of our guys, just because the doors were so heavy, it took one of our guys an entire day to put that together. So those doors ended up being very expensive by the time it was all said and done. So just some things to consider. Leave some room in your budget. Don't do bare minimums, because chances are you're going to go over budget. And everyone told us that in the beginning. They're like, you know, make sure you don't do bare minimums. Make sure you add some money to it. So like, you're not asking for money at the end. We haven't had to ask for any more money, but we are at the end of our budget. So we will file for our final permits within the next month. And I guess that's it. But so it's a 70 by 120 building. Add up all the numbers, you can see roughly what we have in it, and plus land, which, you know, depending on what you buy is just how much you're going to pay. This land needed a lot of work, so we didn't pay a fortune for it, but we did pay enough for it because we have drainage problems. You probably can't see it through here. So because we have drainage problems galore, as you can see over there. All this farmland over here drains to there, crosses down through there, and then it floods our driveway. So that, we call it, Almond River. I forget what Caleb calls it. It calls it something. But it floods the driveway. Everyone thinks it's great. But one thing I know a lot of people don't budget for is the amount of gravel. 30,000 for the gravel is a conservative number. My dad had a bulldozer, so we didn't have to rent that. So we didn't have that expense, but we literally have $30,000 or $40,000 in gravel. So this goes all the way back to that back fence, and then it wraps all the way around the building. And we still need gravel. Look, we have low spots. We have a 5,000 gallon rain tank underground here. It cost us $1,000 to have that buried. The septic guy did it, and it collects all of the rain from the side of the roof, which is pretty cool. And we use that to water plants and wash trucks. We have fuel tanks over there. We didn't have to pay for those as long as we paid for gas. I did all the stonework. I glued it on. I probably had $600 in the actual stone. And it's like a cultured stone. So yeah, gutters were like $3,000 for the place. They're all 6-inch gutters, but they're just like 3 straight lines. And yeah, I think that's it. So we want to do this, but like I said, also we're getting our pole barn resource ready, and that'll be available in March, and it'll be very generalized, so it's not specifically for a shop or a barn dominium or anything like that, but it's just all the things to consider, because I know when we were building, it was like, holy crap, I wish there was like something, because I just don't know what the processes are. I don't know like when insulation goes in or when electric goes in, and like framing was one thing we missed. We had, including the wood, we had like $20,000 in framing, which we budgeted $10,000 for framing. But like all the pricing for everything was so crazy from the time that we, did our budget to the time that it was actually happening. It's been over the course of a year and a half. So that's where, things just, unfortunately, we're way over budget. But all that's good. But yeah, the resource, it'll be great. It'll include things that we wish we did, things that we didn't do, things that we did do right, and things that we will do next time. Throughout the build, keep in mind, it's going to feel like it's taking forever and you're not making any progress. And there were times that I hated this place. I was like, it's taking up so much of our life. Caleb's never home. The kids are like tired of being over here. And now I'm in like the honeymoon phase, because now that we're here and we're working, I love working here. And it's so much more productive. It's so nice to have everything in one place. So with that being said, like and subscribe and follow and leave a comment or ask a question. I don't care. Yeah, we'll talk to you next time.